Well, welcome, everyone. We just had a very interesting presentation by Bill Reese, our president of International Youth Foundation, with a respondent from Peter Woike. It's wonderful to see Peter still here in the front row, for those of you who want to grab Peter. But let us now turn to a really terrific panel, a panel of experts, a panel with great and deep knowledge. And let's get into some of the issues and examples and stories of what seems to be working and the issues that they are wrestling with in their regions and in their programs. As you know, the theme of the conference is the opportunity to divide. I think all of us have been thinking about how the youth employment challenge and opportunity should be addressed, the rising number of youth who lack the skills to perform jobs that are most in demand in their economies. And this was an issue that came up in the last session, knowing what is in demand in your country, your region's economies. And yet, if you have the motivation to perform, which so many of the young people do, they lack the resources then to have the help to acquire these skills. And we are seeing that poor education systems, lack of entrepreneurial opportunities and professional mentorship, as well as the need for stronger and more targeted livelihood skills training. We talked a bit about investing in youth being an investment for the future, but it is also an investment for now. So it is the issue of the moment. It is big, it is important, it is massive. It is one that we all want to think about the ways that we can coalesce in a stronger voice around the world. So we will hear from several knowledgeable experts on this panel, but many more in the days to come. In your programs, you will see their smiling faces. And so let me introduce them to you, but you may already know them. Immediately to my left is Andrea Taylor, Microsoft's Director for North American Community Affairs, and she will focus on North America. To her left is Fernando Jiménez-Ontiveros, the Deputy Managing Director of the Multilateral Investment Fund at the Inter-American Development Bank, and he will focus on Latin and Central America. To his left is Dipali Khanna, Director of Youth Learning at MasterCard Foundation, and she will focus on Africa. And lastly, but never least, because she is from USAID, is Beth Page. She is the Jordan Mission Director, and she will focus on the Middle East. And we do need to have a good geographic balance, so I will add in some thoughts from Asia. So let me just turn immediately to Andrea for some opening remarks. So we will have them open with some thoughts and ideas. Then we will ask them how they react to the call to action. And then the floor will be open to all of you. Andrea.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here. This is such an exciting moment for Microsoft and for IYF, and I want to really preface my remarks by calling out Bill and his team and the leadership and the partnership that Microsoft has had for over a decade with you, and to really come together and make this report, which I think all of us are quite excited about. We've heard a lot about it already this morning, and to get a sense that we have a shared vision, a collective sense of the urgency, and an opportunity to really come together in partnership in a new way for the 21st century for our youth. So we couldn't be more delighted that all of you are here and that we have this opportunity to think and work and brainstorm together. Having said that, with only 5 minutes, I'm going to we could all go on for days and days, but I just want to touch on two things in my opening. One is perhaps a little bit of brief history, not just from the North America perspective, but globally, because while I represent North America, we actually have the same programs or similar programs all over the world. So I want to give you some context about how we arrived at the moment of decision to commission the report by IYF and how that evolved. And then I'd like to just talk a little bit directly about the youth piece and why we're focusing so much of our attention now on youth. Many of you, I hope, have had some touch in your countries or your regions with Microsoft and its work, particularly through our Unlimited Potential program, which began not quite a decade ago, but we set out a very ambitious goal of reaching 250 million people, 250 million people around the world, to help them achieve their potential through access to technology and then later through technology skills training and trying to provide opportunities for individuals to learn the skills of the 21st century so that they could be successful either in business or in work and entrepreneurial settings. And we have almost achieved that goal. It was by 2015 we would reach the 250 million, and I'm happy to say that we are on track to do that. Moving from that very large global objective to what we have been doing in North America, just by way of example, we've had a series of programs over the last several years that have focused on IT skills training and job skills training, particularly for underserved populations. And we define that population very broadly. It includes women, it includes young people, it includes veterans, it includes people with disabilities, and those from other disadvantaged communities who lack access to education and opportunity and who, with skills training, can be transitioned into gainful employment and economic and financial self-sustainability. And it's really interesting as we think about this program, the miner's canary, the thing that really kind of triggered for us this has been the work that we've been doing very recently with something we call Elevate America, where we've been targeting veterans and targeting women and youth in communities across the country. For those of you who may not know, with the wars that are going on in the world that we are involved in, particularly in the post-9/11 era, Iraq and Afghanistan, we have very large numbers of veterans returning. The average age of a veteran is about 22 years old. So these are young people who went right into the military after high school and training, and you heard that only 25% of young Americans can even qualify for the military, as one of our speakers mentioned earlier. And so we've been targeting that group as a particular cohort that needs special attention in terms of getting training. And we've been targeting women and youth. And as we looked at these populations, they began to signal for us that there was a need to do a much deeper dive with younger veterans and younger women and young people in general. And so we are now moving toward building a society that really focuses on developing this opportunity and bridging the opportunity divide that young people face. And so we're going to be focusing our work across the world, specifically on this population and narrowing it and taking a long-term view toward helping young people to get the skills and the opportunities to either be career ready or college ready or to become entrepreneurs or some combination of that. And again, we've heard this morning all the reasons why that's important. I would just like to add quickly that I think it's pretty clear from these discussions and from the report that it takes a village to really help young people to actualize and self-actualize. And one of the tenets, not just of this youth movement that we're seeing develop, but of development generally. Like many of you in the room, I've been involved in development now for a couple of decades. And one of the tenets that is always underlying, if you are trying to work in communities and strengthen communities and help people address their issues, the first point of contact should be empowering and talking with and engaging with the people whom you're trying to impact. And we've heard that here, and I want to underscore that. It's really critical that we talk to the youth and that we engage with them. And so one of the things that we have done since we released the report was released on March 30th of this year, not all that long ago. And since that release, we have had 6 convenings around the world in Redmond, in Brussels, in Cairo, in Singapore, Mexico City, and Beijing, where we have convened about 1,000 young people, all told, to ask them to come into the room and to sit at the table and to tell us what they need and what Microsoft and companies like Microsoft and partners like all of you could do to help them. And it has been the most invigorating experience that you could ever imagine. And the one thread, whatever continent, whatever country, whatever region, the one thread that is consistent that I want to bring to this conversation is that for many of these young people, it's the first time that anyone has ever sat down and invited them to come to the table, to be in the room, to ask them what they need, what they'd like, how they envision their own future, and what we could do to help them. And many of them across these various cities have said it's been a completely life-changing experience. And we see this as a movement that could build, and that these young people can tell other young people, and it could spread. And we're using the tools of technology that Microsoft has, online, social networks, and other ways of communicating that we think will be impactful to build this movement. So I just want to end my opening remarks by saying that we mustn't give up. Partnership is absolutely essential. No one entity has all the resources or all the intellectual capacity to solve these problems, but it must be done in concert with young people. They must be at the table. We must empower them. It's their future, and we can be a part of it, whether we're old or young, AARP members or not. We need all of the resources at the table to address this issue, because all of us will benefit as we help young people to develop. So I will end it there.
Andrea, thank you. I think we all owe a big debt of gratitude to you for partnering on this report. It is an excellent report. But maybe we could take as a takeaway that it would be good to get you and Bill and many of the partners in this room continuing on the airwaves in the next year, talking about this report, talking about the issues, and giving voice to the young people. I mean, this would be a really, really important thrust. So thank you. Fernando.
Well, thank you very much. I want to start by, of course, thanking this opportunity that IYF is offering us to share this panel. I'm very impressed by the audience. I think any of you could be sitting here and probably we would learn more in my case. But so really it's challenging to really kind of, for such an engaged audience to tell them something that is not a cliche or something that you already know. But needless to say, I'll start by one of them. That is that youth is really 1/3 of the population in Latin America. Yet one out of every 5 youth, 32 million people are what is the NEET generation, the NEET generation. And definitely I represent a special fund within the Inter-American Development Bank. We've been working for nearly 20 years learning or through our projects how to try to reach out to youth employment and entrepreneurship. We have already reached over 200,000 disadvantaged youth and with $77 million in projects, leveraging other organizations. We always work in partnership. We have a long-dated partnership with IYF. We have benefited a lot from their expertise and their enthusiasm, and we subscribed completely not only the findings of opportunity for action, but actually the need for this urgent call of action. I feel among friends because actually we have projects with MasterCard, with USAID, and with Microsoft. I see partners of the Americas. I see in the audience many organizations we have been working with. Let me just very briefly perhaps highlight a couple of or 3 observations. We went from our first round of projects have been like more kind of standalone projects trying to deal with specific problems, specifically targeting particularly vulnerable youth and youth at risk and connecting them to employability. Many of the lessons that we have learned have already been stressed. One of them, needless to say, is it's very important to work with the families. It's very important to work with the local employers. Typically, we want to stress the skills for life, which, by the way, the employers value like 3 times more the skills for life than the technical skills in recent surveys in Latin America. But there's also some skills for life that should be also taught to the employers. I mean, we have to, some employers will not ever hire a youth in Central America with a tattoo, for instance. Or even if they had removed the tattoo, they're still excluded. So I think there's a lot of work also to do to open up the mindset of the corporations. And we see a great pattern in a broader engagement of corporations at the local level. And also, as you said, working with the families. Training has an opportunity cost for the parents. We need, another observation is we need long-term presence. Sometimes I'm a little concerned that when we do like a 3-year project in a place and we build hope, we build expectations, there's a tremendous reputational risk if that is not a long-term action. And all of this combined lead us to our second phase, and I'll stop there. We are promoting now precisely a new, as part of the call for action that IYF was referring to, and with IYF as the core partner, we're promoting the new employment opportunities for youth, the NEO, like in metrics, the NEO initiative. And because what we want to do now is to scale up our efforts, to see, I think we have a wealth of experience, and particularly IYF has even more in terms of models, what works, what doesn't work. It's about time we engage more with governments and with corporations. We already had a very encouraging response from corporate partners, Caterpillar, Microsoft, Walmart, Cemex, Arcos Dorado. We're in conversations with City Foundation and FEMSA, also with Hilton and Manpower. And we already have like a core 37 million contribution in cash, but even more important than that is the in-kind, the presence. Only Walmart has like 350,000 employees in the region. So I think this is key. And through our connection internally with the rest of the IDB group, we want to use the convening power of the Inter-American Development Bank to approach governments. If there's something that now that we are really promoting this program, and I'll stop there, it's very difficult, really, I think Bill was referring to that, to have the same pitch, the same official message, the same language for corporations and governments. Hopefully, because we have been working with both as in the Multilateral Investment Fund in the last 20 years, but there is sometimes distrust or even cliches, prejudices, and it's very difficult to articulate. And needless to say, this is a collective action. Everybody first, before me, stress that you need joint participation of civil society, of governments and private sector. My last message, I promise. We keep saying that we have to count on the youth. We don't do it enough. We're not using the social networks, the potential of the youth, like not only helping us to design the projects, and tracking where they are and how can they, because they can become the critical role models for other youth, particularly in youth at risk, when your life expectancy is 24 years, to have a multilateral talking to them about investing in your future and your long-term plans, etc. They need to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that is much more enforced if the message comes from another young person.
Fernando, thank you. I think you're making an excellent point on making sure that all of these programs are planned with youth in the country, but also your offer and suggestion on convening power is an important one for every one of these panelists. So, Fernando, thank you. Dipali.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to begin by thanking Bill and the IYF team for an excellent report and the excellent work that you're doing across the globe, as well as getting all the experts around the room together to talk about these issues for 3 days. I must admit, I'm not an expert on Africa, but I'm very passionate about Africa. Just a little bit of background about the foundation. We were set up in 2006 because we received an unprecedented gift of generosity from MasterCard Worldwide, and I have Pat Devereaux from the company who's here and will be talking to you in the afternoon. The foundation's vision is to provide opportunities to all to learn and prosper. We're talking about all is really disadvantaged young people in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's really what our vision is. And we want to prepare young people to be part of the formal economy, again, in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's really what the foundation stands for. We're focusing on 2 areas, microfinance and youth learning. I guess going back to the report and what we've read is something that we've been talking about on a daily basis, because this is really the core of what the foundation is doing. We're all familiar with the youth bulge in Africa. We know there are many opportunities, and yes, I fully agree, young people are not the problem. They really need to be given the opportunities they have. That's their fundamental right. So how are we really creating the opportunities for them to be part of the social and economic development, to be part of the social transformation in Africa, which is absolutely vital? Having said that and seen what's there in the report, some of the issues that I'd like to highlight are around the growth sectors in Africa. Now, again, on one side, there is a lot of investment happening, for example, in the agriculture sector, but more and more young people are not really able to benefit from that growth. They still continue to be in the informal economy, as we've seen in the report. Access to education, again, with the Millennium Development Goals, there's a lot that's happened around basic education. But talking about secondary education, or even going back to basic education, it's still not free in many countries in Africa. It still remains something, even if the tuition fee is not there, there are many additional levies that parents have to pay. So what's happening? A lot of young people are dropping out from school. The statistics are really scary, because only 33% young people are making it to secondary education. And at the higher level, it's only 6%. So, there's really an immense challenge around here when it comes to access. I'm not even getting onto the issues of quality and relevance, because again, as our friend from India said, knowledge economy, the curriculum that is being taught, et cetera, there are quite a few challenges out there. Looking at the issue of urban youth and rural youth, again, in rural areas, young people feel that the urban centers, the urban areas are dream propositions for them. We all know that the kind of situation in the urban areas is no better, maybe worse, than what's there in the rural side. And how are we really ensuring that we can benefit from the growth sectors? What role can the private sector play in terms of the value chains and many other additional opportunities that can be tapped into so that they stay back and have a meaningful, decent job in the areas where they come from? Again, talking about the demand side, constantly the private sector is saying the skill sets are not there. The soft skills that we are looking for, maybe the technical skills are there, but we really want more than that. We want people who can, for whom critical thinking is part of their DNA. We want entrepreneurs who can take risks. These are things that are not being taught in school. These are things that are really fundamental and important for Africa and for the rest of the regions, because I think that's where everybody is struggling right now. Moving on to the holistic approach, you have government policymakers, as our friend was saying, on one side, I talk to government officials all the time, and they're saying, look, we need the evidence. Tell us what's worked. You're giving us anecdotal evidence here, there, this is something that's done well. You're talking about 20 young people who've benefited. We want programs that can be scaled up. Governments really want successful models. So, how are we really building up the evidence base so that government can really scale up successful models? How can we really build up partnerships across different stakeholders, be it government, civil society, private sector, donors, multilaterals, bilaterals? Because the resources are out there, but there's not a coordinated approach. And how do we stop looking at young people in vertical silos? We're thinking about their education at one point of time. We're looking at skill development at another point of time. Then suddenly, we need to get the private sector. But how do we really build up comprehensive programs that are really helping them to make all these transitions at every stage of life? Because that's really where they need a lot of support. They need mentoring. They need peer-to-peer support. And there are many models out there. But how can we really pull them together? I guess the other important thing that I'd like to draw out is the access to financial services. That's, again, something that, yes, the jobs are not there in rural areas. Young people may not be entrepreneurs, but that's the only thing they can do. But again, they get stuck. They get all the skill sets through all the wonderful work that NGOs are doing. But where are the youth financial products that these young people can benefit from? Nobody, the banks or the MFIs, don't want to trust these young people. They don't want to take risks with them. So young people are again stuck in that situation. How can they get on with life and do something? So that's something that we've been observing, as well as I think the points that were made earlier in the plenary around listening to young people. we're tending to, all of us are guilty of that. We're doing things for them. How often are we consulting with them and really saying, what is it that you really would like to do, and how can we accompany that whole process? So I think those are very important questions. And at the end of the day, whom are we accountable to? Are we really holding ourselves accountable to young people? If they were sitting in this room and we were telling them, well, these are the investments between the four of us that we've made, what would they tell us? So I think these are very important questions that we need to ponder on, and I'm sure you're really the experts, and I'm here to learn from all of you and see how we can benefit from your experience and move some of these things forward. Talking about the work that we're doing in sub-Saharan Africa, there are three areas that we're really focusing on at this point of time. The first one is, sorry, I'm being told I'm going very fast, and I think with the translation, there's some issue there. I'm really sorry. Yeah. Okay, so the first area that we are really trying to put all our focus on is access to secondary education and post-secondary education. We feel that, yes, there are many players out there who are talking about basic education, and even though there's work that still needs to be done, but we really feel as a foundation, we really want to look at the transition point from post-primary to secondary and post-secondary and beyond. And again, when we're looking at this, we're looking not just at access, but quality and relevance issues, going back to the knowledge economy, looking at the curriculum, looking at issues around teacher training, looking at how reproductive health is incorporated into the program curriculum that these young people are being taught. How do you really help them to have the leadership skills that will help them to succeed? So that's really an important piece of our work. And we really want to see how young people at the end of this journey are able to get jobs that will really help them to be able to give back to their own communities and be able to transform where they come from. The second, and of course here we have some very interesting models that we've taken from Paraguay in Latin America to Tanzania. Fundacia in Paraguay, I don't know how many of you know about the program, but they've been doing some very interesting work around self-sustaining schools and how they're teaching entrepreneurship through the entire time that the young students are studying in the formal system. And they actually get experience of being a successful entrepreneur. What does it mean? So they actually have projects that they're running. And that whole experience, when they come out of that system, they're definitely a very different breed of young people. There are other programs that we have with organizations such as Aflatun, which are doing a lot of work around financial savings and how do you, from a very young age, get young people to be able to understand what it means to save. I think for a lot of people from the developed world, you guys had passbooks and savings accounts, but coming from the developing world, I know that till the time I didn't get into college, I didn't have an account, and it was unheard of that I could have an account before that. So through our Aflatun program, that's something where at a very early age, we are helping young people to really understand the importance of saving and what it means and how they can be responsible in if they have to take credit, what would it mean and how they're not going to get more indebted, et cetera. The second important area that the foundation is focusing on is developing skills of out-of-school youth. We know there are many young people, they may be working in the agriculture sector, they may be in urban slums. So how do you really help them to catch up? And catch up at different levels, the literacy and numeracy skills that they need, which are responding to the market needs. How do we really help them to be able to be prepared for the private sector opportunities that are coming up? So again, it's really looking at the entire continuum where you really start with programs such as what we're doing with Save the Children around the literacy boost curriculum to taking them through vocational training, apprenticeships, or starting up their business. So everything that a young person needs in that journey is something that we're looking at. And this is an area where we would really like to get more thoughts from all of you because it's a difficult area. There really not enough comprehensive models that have worked. Or even if they worked, we are still trying to see what are the impacts, what are the results, have they been evaluated? What has worked, what hasn't worked. So that'll be an important conversation moving forward because there's so much that needs to be done. And if they're successful models, let's talk about it. And even if they're not successful, I'm sure from something that hasn't worked, we can still learn from it so that the others don't start going the same way. The last important piece of work that we are doing is, besides, of course, working with private sector and connecting young people to jobs, is also working with the International Labour Organization, ILO, to build up some robust evidence around school-to-work transitions and really understanding across the globe in all 5 regions what is happening, how are young people making these transitions, because if we really want to influence policy, we need to have this evidence. And again, segregating young people in different cohorts, we were talking about 12 to 14, 14 to 18, their needs, their aspirations are very different. Looking at gender issues, you can't just have one program that's going to respond to everybody's needs, because you will have to design different kinds of programs when you're looking at vulnerable young girls as opposed to working with young boys who are in the agriculture sector. So I think that piece of evidence that we are going to be getting across the different parts of the globe in the next 5 years will be very interesting and will hopefully help advance this discussion. Also, at the foundation, we've been talking about really who are we accountable to and how we're really getting young people to tell us what they really want us to be doing as a foundation. So we have a think tank of young people now, and they're the ones who are constantly giving us feedback and inputs into our strategy and telling us what are the important learning questions that we as a foundation need to be addressing as we move forward in this journey. So this is really an exciting moment for us from the foundation to really be part of this journey with all of you and to see how we can really do better, because right now we're working in 20 countries in Africa. We know within these 20 countries we can do much more, but out of the 54 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, there's so much more that needs to be done. And so really looking forward to the discussion.
Good. Thank you, Dipali. That's very comprehensive and very interesting. I think the idea of a think tank for young people is terrific, and that will inform all of your work. Beth, you have been in the part of the world for civic engagement. So your thoughts?
I thought, first of all, that the morning session was very interesting, and I took frantic notes and got a lot of new ideas. And then I met with some of the IYF staff from Jordan during the break, and we all agreed that the more different we all are, the more the same we actually all are, and that we have many of the same issues. So far it's great. I'm taking your think tank idea, wrote that down also. So I have a lot of really rich discussion already, so I can't wait till the rest of the weekend comes. I did want to, though, I'm going to divert a little bit and touch on some of the things that were brought up this morning. And we talked about, needing to think bigger and take things to scale. But I think at the same time, we also have to, while we think bigger, think smaller. And I know the one young woman from Mexico brought up, getting the family engaged. And I know for the Middle East, the strength of the family is so important that if you don't engage the family, you've almost lost the battle already. And I've met with many youth across the country in Jordan, and I remember meeting with one young man who was very determined. He had dropped out of school originally. IYF had him in a program. He graduated with his high school equivalency, had gone on to college, but through the IYF program, he went through the life skills training and decided that he was going to his cause. He found himself, he found his passion, and it was garbage. And he was going to clean up Jordan, and he was going to start garbage companies. He had groups of friends picking up garbage. He was going to clean the town, and starting in the small community, then the town, and then Jordan. That's his goal. But his family, I said, well, how is your family reacting? He said, they've been brutal. Brutal. I mean, how sad is that you find your passion and your family doesn't support you? So I think we have to do more and more work with families to let them understand that there's nothing shameful about any kind of honest work. I heard another young woman at the same session talk about how she was the only girl in her tourism class because tourism is not acceptable in the society for young women, and even to some extent for the young men. And I asked again about her family, and her mother was there with her saying, I will support my daughter no matter what. She can do whatever she wants, I'm pushing it. I said, well, what about the rest of the family? And she said, they're coming along, she said, but I'm the buffer. And you have to have those strong family units supporting you. So so thank you for the comment on the families. One of the other things that was brought up this morning was the issue of population and development. And I know that's a big issue for us in Jordan also. Again, with the same population growth rate that the gentleman brought up at 2.2. And it's about, if we don't bring up that issue, we're going to be not just facing the issues we're facing today with needing 70,000 new jobs every year, but we're also it's going to be larger than that. And so we're just kicking the can down the road, and we'll be sitting here 10 years from now saying, what happened? It got worse. So, so we're bringing in that topic with all of our entire development program within Jordan. Use of technology, again, being one of those over 50 and having to have my children show me how to use the BlackBerry when I first got it. I mean, I certainly understand the importance, and we're all learning now to better use technology to reach out to the young people in the country. It's been a challenge because, as you know, being all the old people in the office, it was hard to bring on, to get started. But we are starting to embrace technology. We're coming around. We realized we were the problem, so we're moving forward on that. And we're actually working on a game that is similar to the, I don't know if you all have played the game, it's called Life. But it's a internet-based game that's similar to that takes you through problems and questions and scenarios that they learn about the various kinds of things that they would encounter during life. And I think you'll talk population and development will certainly be part of that. But how to do budgeting, how to do life skills, because we can't get every single youth in the country in a classroom with us in a life skills. So we want to try to do what we can to reach everyone. One of the things that in Jordan that we have found too is that we really have to look at, and what I've heard here is really look at the different demographics within the youth demographic. You've got where we've got, obviously, men and women have to be addressed very differently, and their needs are very different, and their desires are very different. But also looking at the youth that are at high risk, the ones that have dropped out of school, that may not have learned, have succeeded in school, and therefore did not get the benefit of a good education and didn't either pass their high school equivalency exam or ended up dropping out because of frustration. Looking at that group is very different when you're looking with the college students or the college graduates. They have very different needs. One thing I will bring up that in terms of the high-risk youth that drop out of school, what we've been finding is that many of them don't read or write, and that's not consistent necessarily with the statistics that the government issues. And so it was a little bit of a surprise, I think, when we were starting the programming that we had to actually teach young people to read and write before we could actually start doing job training. So as part of our education portfolio that's looking at basic education, we're actually starting to test where's the breakdown, and are there learning disabilities that aren't being addressed. And so we're going to be starting at the very, very young ages in looking at this so that in the future, again, we won't have the kind of issues that we're facing now. I will bring up one topic from a different country, but I think it's relevant worldwide. Is I met with a psychiatrist once who was working with young people who had been picked up by the Army when they were looking at terrorist camps. And this was obviously not in Jordan. And she was working with these young people to try to, bring them back into society. And she said that the majority of them, 99% of them, had learning disabilities. And these were smart kids who the educational system had not addressed, and they found themselves dropped out and needing someone to appreciate them. And if we don't, somebody else will. And so it's a big concern, I think, worldwide. In the United States, you see gangs. They actually are very smart. They'll target, they can identify a kid that doesn't feel that they're part of a community or accepted by a community. So that's another thing we're looking at. Really, what happens when, why are they dropping out, and why is the educational system not capturing the fact or catching the fact that they have some learning disabilities that might impact their social skills or their ability to learn in a normal school setting. So in sum, if we don't embrace them, somebody else will. And so I think that group is a very important group to work with.
Beth, thank you. Very interesting and very interesting interweaving of the issues at home, of families, of customs, with those of the issues of employment worldwide. Well, let me add a few thoughts here from Asia, and then let's turn to our panelists for their thoughts on the call to action. So Asia, many of you are already working in Asia, as you know, has all the same disparities of the other regions that we've been hearing about. Some countries like Cambodia and Laos, the number of people in their population who are below the age of 24 is 63%. That is an enormous number in any country, in any working environment. And then in other parts of Asia, like Singapore, that number is 19%. So countries are struggling with a wide variety of issues and with different employment and unemployment rates. I thought I would just highlight a few of the programs that are going on, just to give you some ideas. If you don't have some of these currently that you're utilizing, I think all of us have seen such creativity in the field that it's always useful to hear some of the ideas of other people. So Intel has an Easy Steps program. It is in Asia, and it addresses the digital literacy needs of government employees, of communities of women, of unemployed youth. Everything from how to use email to how to do a spreadsheet. And we've heard this as being an issue, but it's a really interesting kind of a program. So I will mention the Intel program. Microsoft in Indonesia has a very interesting program on educational games. We've heard about this before in the first session, about teaching science or teaching mathematics through the use of games. You imagine that you're an astronaut or that you are a physicist or a geologist. This has enormous potential for engagement, and the whole issue that we were also beginning to discuss, that of engagement of youth populations. Johnson & Johnson in the Philippines with World Vision has an interesting program that is targeting the senior year of high school students in health-related careers. But what they do is they follow it with a scholarship to the University of the Philippines for the School of Health Sciences so that you can obtain a community health worker degree. You can also obtain a midwifery degree. But what is good here is that the training connects with a certificate, which then connects to a career. YUM's Technical Training Center in rural Indonesia. You know, YUM has been growing rapidly in China and other places, but this one is in central Kalimantan. And they're doing technical training with local companies and micro businesses, mapping production and consumption. They are talking about in-demand trades needed locally, like plumbing, motorcycle mechanics, repair of mobile phones, something that all of us have known in the rural sectors, and small electronics. So all of those are good life skills. The Skoll Foundation has 200 people that are currently in Pakistan. They are focusing on ages 9 through 19 at various stages in their educational paths. They focus on literacy and life skills and civic education. But then they add a program that has social entrepreneurship, and it is for ages 21 through 35. So as a result, this becomes a lifelong skill-building process. Let me also mention the MasterCard one that I think we've been hearing a lot about, the good programs that are in Africa. But in India, there's a revolving loan fund that has technical assistance and technical skills, and it's paired with mentorship. So it creates a culture and a momentum toward entrepreneurship. IYF has had one of the signature projects that all of us have known after the tsunami, and this was focused on processing of cashews, bottling of juices, producing handicrafts. This is a hugely important area, and there's a tourism factor, but what has happened here is it's focused on long-term success, and it's focused on the ripple effects within a community, and those are really important watchwords. And then, of course, IYF's Education and Employment Alliance is one that has really scaled up. And then lastly, let me just mention the one that has been partnering with USAID and ELSA that IYF has been doing in Mindanao in the Philippines. They've been building and repairing classrooms, community learning centers, but they have paired this with job opportunities so that you can have access to accredited learning and youth and civic engagement. And I think all of these provide threads of areas that we can build on in the future in our own programs. So I will just add those. So let me begin with Andrea, the call to action, your responses, and then we will turn to all of you for thoughts, ideas, suggestions, experts. Andrea.
Well, this has been a very interesting discussion, and one of the things that it seems is very clear that the cultural setting and the community resources may be different across the world, but I think we really are all very similar in what we're trying to address. And again, young people are extremely the same in their aspiration and their desire for a better life. And so we're really putting at the heart of our call to action. And the first step was the release of the report and to really reach out to others. But at the center for us is, as I said earlier, will be a youth-focused program. And in North America, it's an interesting kind of challenge because it's kind of slipped up on us in this country, in the US in particular. And I think I don't need to recite some of the statistics in terms of performance and competitiveness globally that the US faces, but we're not doing very well, in case anyone hasn't noticed, and we're really losing ground. And the recent economic crisis and recession, which is lingering, has really heightened the awareness of the problems and made it much more challenging and difficult, not only for young people, but for older workers as well. And so the tension that we're experiencing makes it a challenge. But with this decision to focus on young people, we really have to look at it from a number of aspects, including the educational settings and the kinds of ways that we reach out and help young people to learn. And it's been a very slow process. Anecdotally, for example, I was on a panel recently and someone was telling the story of a mother and child who were in a local store, electronics store, shopping for a new television. And so the mother was talking to the salesperson and getting information about various products while this young child under 5 years old was running around the store on the floor looking at various equipment. And the child continued to touch the screens, and of course nothing was happening. These are televisions. You need to turn them on with the remote or something. Anyway, the child came running over to the mother and said, "We can't shop here. We need to leave this store because none of the products work." Because their children now are used to touch. I may be among the few grandmothers in the room, and my grandchildren at age 2 have full command of all the devices in their household. They know what to do. They don't require literacy. Microsoft puts out products, gaming products, where literacy is not required. Your movement is the key. You touch and you move and things happen. And so we really need to start focusing on the different ways that young people learn and thinking differently in our educational systems about how we're going to be prepared for the future. And it's not, as was mentioned by a speaker earlier, it's not specific to any particular demographic. It's a challenge for underserved populations as well as those who are educated. And you can pick up the newspaper on any day of the week in America and see that various groups are being highly disadvantaged. We know, for example, that the computer science is the second highest degree, college degree, in demand and highest paying coming right out of college. Today, as I sit here, Microsoft, just as an example, has 5,000 open positions in computer science. And as a graduating senior coming out in this season of graduation and baccalaureates and so forth, there are jobs that are available at paying $100,000 plus a year, and we can't find people to fill those jobs. So there's a real disconnect between the kind of training and educational opportunities that we're offering in our systems and the needs that employers have. And I think part of our call to action is to try to highlight that and to encourage more STEM education, more emphasis on subjects and areas that are particularly relevant and will empower young people. The other piece that I want to particularly talk about is the peer-to-peer learning opportunity, because those of us who are not digital natives but who are digital immigrants have a hard time teaching and adapting systems that could help these young people and engage them. We find, though, that if you get older, younger people to help the younger people, then something really exciting begins to happen. So we have a program, for example, that we hope to scale this year that was started by one of our employees. And the program involves teaching computer science in the high school. It began in Puget Sound, where we're headquartered and have about 42,000 employees. And this young man is a graduate of Harvard Graduate School of Education. So he's trained as a teacher, but he was working as a programmer in the technology side of the company. And he determined that he wanted to go into the public schools in Seattle that were not offering computer science as a core curriculum, and organized to help do that. So before he comes to his job at Microsoft, he was spending 2 hours, 3 or 4 days a week in the public schools, helping them to develop a computer science track and working with the teachers as well as with the students. He then realized that there was a huge demand for this, and he organized other colleagues who work at Microsoft who were also willing, with training by him about how to manage a classroom and how to teach. He was able to proliferate and scale this program. We now have almost 100 employees working at this in addition to their full-time jobs. And we seek to scale this program in about 30 states and communities across the country. And we find that these young people are able to relate to other young people in ways that older workers and older individuals who just don't have the affinity for the technology can do so. So I think that there's some good models like that. A lot of the youth-serving organizations that we work with, Boys and Girls Clubs comes to mind in North America, also have young employee groups, or employees who are working with the other younger children, and they can be trained. So we're trying to recalibrate our programming so that we're not just helping the beneficiaries in these youth-serving programs, but we're also training the trainers and helping them to train others so that you can bridge this opportunity divide. And then finally, using gaming and some of the tools of gaming and thinking differently about the pedagogy that needs to be introduced, because young people are absorbing information very differently. They're using social networks very differently. When we hosted our meetings across the world that I mentioned earlier after the release of the report, we had green rooms for the people who were over 25, so that they were pulled out of some of the sessions, so that young people could talk among themselves with facilitation, because when older adults come into the room, they tend to dominate and take over. They have the power, and they don't allow space for young people to engage. And so, again, I think there's some new techniques and new tools and new approaches that we need to consider, which is going to be very much at the heart of our program. And I would just finally say that we have, there's also an element of competition and gaming and engagement with technology that can be very appealing to young people. Young people like to compete. We know this from the sports activities, but they can compete intellectually. And so we have a program, just as an example, called the Imagine Cup. I hope all of you are familiar with it. If you are not, you should go to our website and look into it. But essentially, it's a competition that's globally conducted first by local, in local communities, and then regionally, and then nationally, and then internationally. And every year, about 300,000 plus young people are encouraged to bring forward their technology ID and compete. And then as they winnow down, there are finalists who, about 400 or 500 people who come together to present their ideas to others, and then they're selected winners, and they get support, technology, mentorship, and financing from Microsoft to develop their ideas. This year they will be in Sydney, Australia. Last year they were in New York. So there are a number of new techniques that we will be introducing to try to really engage very directly with young people in ways that make sense to them and that allow them to be the drivers in terms of what they need and how we who have resources can help them.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, Andrea. Well, we will be hearing from several panels later with more voices from younger panelists, and so this will be very important. But I think you're pointing the way to where we all need to go. Fernando, thoughts? Call to action.
Thank you. Yeah, before I respond specifically to the call for action question, I wanted to second what you said. It's so incredibly important. No, I think that the new technologies are shaping even the learning process of youth and how they can be interested, how they interact with information, with knowledge, and obviously our projects have to be precisely talking to them in their language. And we're working with Microsoft on some of these projects. As sports for youth, for instance, sports as a means of, and his partners of the America of integration, economic and social integration is critical. Arts as well. I think that few times we rely on the creativity and the ability of youth also to identify new job opportunities. No, more specifically, we second the call for action mostly through our partnership with IYF, New Employment Opportunities, NEO. Now, this partnership really is, the purpose is to increase job entry among poor and low-income youth, bringing together key private and public sector, civil society actors. And so just to tell you some 10-year goals and to just share with you how big we're thinking, our goal is to train 1 million disadvantaged youth and incorporate the best practices of our job training programs through our, again, 200 projects we already have, and with the support of IYF, good knowledge of what works. And so what we're trying to achieve, we're aiming at achieving job placement rates of 50 to 60%, which are consistent, by the way, with the results of our projects so far. We want to make sure that 50% or more of the youth trained are girls and young women. If youth is at risk, being a woman, you're doubly vulnerable. And as somebody, I think you said, women empowerment is a key solution to really deal with teenager pregnancies. Women empowerment is key, and particularly also in societies and countries where there's a breakdown of the family, and either the father or the mother has migrated, or there's many single mothers. So really, women empowerment is going to be key for our gender strategy, but I think scaling up is the name of the game in this new initiative. We've been seeing more and more interest from governments to really learn from these models that foundations, corporations are offering. So really, we want to promote the adoption of those high impact models in the government programs. If we are just able to do that, to make a little more efficient the incredible amount of programs to train youth in the region, I think that would be a very important result. And also mobilizing 1,000 companies, over 1,000 companies, to offer internships. That's also another learning process. Now how important internships, coaching, mentoring is in really in building youth employability. And also to strengthen the capacity of over 200 job training providers. I think it's very important to have many professionals and many sound institutions doing that. The way we want to do that, we have, as I expressed before, already a core number of corporations. At the bank and the Multilateral Investment Fund, that is the part of the bank that I represent, will be engaging with them through a steering committee. We will have the first steering committee in July, I understand, to really have the core strategy and the identification of targeted countries, initial targeted countries. But we want really that the core of this initiative be what we will call national partnerships, to identify some countries, because one size doesn't fit all. And if there's something where we, after 20 years, have experience, is sitting around the table, institutions that rarely meet and apply public and private partners. And so these partnerships I think are going to be critical to establish, hopefully, that link between models that work, that can provide the kind of evidence that governments are looking for, and taking this to scale. This will all be encompassed and help through our partners with a very intensive strategic communication process so as to reach out to other partners and stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Very good, Fernando. Thank you. Dipali, you were good enough to give us some really wonderful examples for what you were doing, but your thoughts about the call to action?
I think for us, we want to continue to act locally, but think globally around all that we're trying to do in this space. In the last 2 years, the foundation has invested close to $300 million in sub-Saharan Africa on youth employment and education issues. We'll continue to do that. We'll try and build South-South partnerships, because I think for the call to action, that's going to be critical moving forward. We want to understand the ecosystem a lot better, and from the lens of a young person's perspective rather than we as adults. So I think within that ecosystem, what roles and what responsibilities would each one of us have will be important. I think we definitely would be also looking for models around learning, earning, and saving for young people. I think that's really where the foundation would really like to have some good nexus programming, because with our work on microfinance and youth learning, we feel really getting the microfinance institutions to start looking at youth financial services and products that they can offer will be something where we'd like to invest so that young people can be successful as entrepreneurs or whatever they'd like to do. I think the whole area of impact sourcing, again, we know there's a lot out there, and we have some very exciting programs with Summer Source, Digital Divide Data, which are opening up a huge amount of opportunities for young people. That's something we'd really like to tap and see how they can become part of the formal economy, because some of these programs are telling us that within a year, these young people can actually be part of the formal economy. The success rate that some of our partners have is as high as 80%. So we want to build on that. I think also we'd like to celebrate youth entrepreneurs. I think somebody spoke about it in the previous panel. We have the Anzisha Prize, which means beginning in Swahili. And this is an event that is run annually. We hope this is going to be as important as the Nobel Peace Prize for Africa. Africa Leadership Academy is annually running these Anzisha events. So they get these young youth entrepreneurs from refugee camps from across the continent who've really gone through a lot of struggle, but they're successful. So those are the kind of people that we want to recognize, celebrate, and see how we can invest further in them so that they can really become role models. And I think somebody really spoke very well to this in the morning. So that's what we want to do more. I think at a global level, what the foundation would really like to do, how can we feed this into the post-MDG discussion? Because again, this is important. We've been part of the Global Compact on Learning that some of you must be knowing of, the Center for Universal Education, where there's a great synergy which is being created around how do we really look at all the transition points for young people, right from early childhood care and development to post-secondary education. And within that, how we ensuring that the soft skills, the life skills, everything that a young person needs to go through is well taken care of. So there's a lot of synergy around the work that's happening and the call to action. So how do we really build those bridges? Also, as a foundation, I think one of the things that came up in the morning is the convening ability. And that's where we feel that, with the workforce development and the youth financial services, how can we at a global level get that collaboration really happening? Because I think that is something that is really needed. There are many good models out there. It's just that we don't know of them, or we just need to find them. So I think through that convening, through that collaboration, we will hear of many successful stories which we can take back. And with the South-South partnership, one is seeing some amazing results. So we really want to build on it.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Dipali. Thank you very much. And Beth, thoughts on call to action?
Yes, first I'd like to thank you all for making this so short and concise. I know it could have easily been over 100 pages or maybe even 1,000 pages, but it was actually a pleasure to read. And I think it's right on target. I think that it is a good foundation for further dialogue, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to take this back to Jordan specifically and use it as the foundation for a broader discussion within Jordan with the various donors and private sector actors. And I think what I appreciate most about the report is the action items at the end, because so often you talk with members of the private sector or government, and they what can I do? What is it that I can do? And here it's clearly laid out, and again, forming a foundation for where we can go next. So excellent document, a good foundation for us to then take it and run with it. And so, yeah, thank you very much, and we'll report back on what happens once we're back in country. But again, the next couple of days, a very good learning experience, I think, for taking lessons back.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Thoughts, ideas, suggestions. Let's take 4 in the beginning. So there's a gentleman in the back, and people who haven't spoken before. And would you identify where you're from? So.
Jack Boyson, a retired member of the IYF staff after nearly 2 decades. So it's a hot day in Washington, and I'm wondering about the call for employment for young people and the connection with global warming. I haven't heard anybody talk about that yet. And so I'd like to hear the panelists to talk about what is the nexus between job creation and global warming. And should we be emphasizing how young people who are the stewards of this earth and how they can do a better job? Thank you.
Very good. All right. So global warming is number 1. Let's have 3 more questions. Microphones? Can you? There's a lady right there. And there's a microphone up here. So you saw the hands right here. Just let's get to.
I'm Jessica Drake. I'm from the United States, the Living Classrooms Foundation, and we really work from cradle to grave. We see problems in older society. We see post-incarceration issues, and so we focus on young adults who we can help grow through and not have these problems. One of the questions I would put to the panel is, how do you see follow-up for all the wonderful programs that we have out here for youth? What happens when you leave our employment training? Do you stay with the program for another 3 years with follow-up? What's the value in that? I'd like to hear the panel comment on the next years after the training.
Thank you, Drake. Yes, here's a microphone here. Yes. Please.
Good morning. I am Paulo, director for the Walmart Foundation in Brazil. And I include myself in the question, but I would like to hear the panelists talking about the issue of trial and error in terms of social programs versus the issue of methodology and control groups. So how scientific are we being to the programs we are implementing throughout the world? Thank you.
Okay, very good. Measurements. And then one more. How about this gentleman right here?
Thank you. My name is Andrei Levchik, and I'm representing NGO from Moscow, Russia. And I've got only one question for the representatives of IYF and Microsoft in terms of the reports about youth employment. So the question is, was the information from Russia used for this report?
All right. Then IYF and Microsoft, would anybody like to take this question right now for Andre, and then we will turn to the trial and error question, the post-employment and the global warming.
I would defer to Bill on the Russia question
Bill,
for the
Peter,
report, because
Russia.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I'll have to refer to that. Refer back to the one who made the question.
Maybe we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, I can just say briefly that the sources were primarily secondary sources, so we drew on sources from all over the world, and then we included some anecdotal or stories from various different places, but it was really an aggregate, and one of the reasons why it was so short and concise also.
They're all footnoted.
They're all footnoted, though, yes.
All right. So there may be more discussion on that with Andre about Russian data. All right, panel, trial and error, the measurements, post-employment or global warming.
I'll start with the metrics. Metrics are extremely important. I think all of us here would agree that we know that the resources that we have to invest are very precious, and you don't want to squander that resource, and you want each investment to have an impact on subsequent investments in ways that you can strengthen communities and both scale programs, given the numbers that we've heard all morning about the needs, whether you're in North America or Asia or Latin America, wherever you go in the world. Scaling is important because of the large numbers of people that we're talking about. So you want to make sure that you're investing your dollars and other resources that you bring to bear. We bring employees, we bring product, we bring software. You want those to make a difference. And so we, as a corporate entity, don't have for example, on staff, the kind of infrastructure to do the studies and the assessments ourselves, but we certainly encourage and support that with our partners. So the organizations, the youth development organizations that we work with are all keeping data. They're doing short-term assessments, they're doing longitudinal studies, they're trying to track the cycle of programs that are most impactful with young people and where the interventions need to occur and what the outcomes are. And in most cases, particularly with job training and employment training programs, they're tracking not only the skills that they bring initially, but what skills are they going to require to get a job, and then how long after they get those skills does it take them to get the job? Do they retain the job? What kind of ongoing training do they need? I think we've heard here today, and we know that lifelong learning is critical, so you want to try to instill that. But I think there's also a policy question implied here that we really haven't touched on, certainly in the US, that if we're going to scale and sustain programs at the level that's required based on the deficits that we have in the youth population, there needs to be more attention to making those studies and the learning from these programs, turning them into best practices and sharing those with government entities and other entities that really do have the capacity to scale. And we know that we can work, we have invested in a range of programs, for example, and we know that you can have an impact on young people despite some of the disadvantages that they bring, whether they're women or veterans or young people from disadvantaged communities with lack of proper educational training. But the question always comes down to how much cost has to be invested in order to get the result and to get a young person from unemployment to employment, or from unemployment to entrepreneurship, or from high school to college and being college ready. And there's a policy implication there, because how much are we willing as a society and as a community to invest? Are we willing to invest $5,000 per person, $15,000 per person, some other number? And so getting good metrics really helps you with that and helps you to make good decisions and good policy about what kind of programs can scale, how much will that cost, and then what is required to sustain those programs if they work. And I think that's at the core of the work that all of us are doing, and it's critical. It has to be a driver. And governments, in many cases, are going to have to step up, whether, again, you're in the United States or in Europe or in the developing world. Governments are going to play a critical role, so it's not a unilateral decision that any one of us can make. It has to be made in the context of what else is happening in the environment, and what are the resources, and how can you pool and blend them for the greatest impact for the young people. The other point that I would just add to that is that it's not, as at least we find in our programs, and again, I'd be interested in other colleagues here and their perspective, but it's not enough to just give someone training and get them certified to do something. We find that the programs that are most successful are offering a range of services and training and skills, so they need life skills, dressing properly, interviewing properly, thinking about a career plan. All of these, sometimes in our programs we have to provide transportation for people, you have to give them housing advice. There's a whole range of activities that are required to help a young person to achieve success. And so that has to also be factored into both the metrics and in the cost models of these best practices. So it can be done. The question is, how much is required? Who's going to provide it? How do you evaluate whether it's working? And then how do you scale and sustain it?
Which then also addresses the post-employment question that Drake was talking about. Anyone want to talk about global warming?
Well, we're just, as we speak, the Multilateral Investment Fund is presenting in Rio Plus 20 what we call the climatoscope, which is the first really thorough ranking of all Latin American and Caribbean countries in terms of, we call it the investment climate for climate investment. That is, what are the market conditions in the region really to promote the engagement of particularly small companies in a broad range of environmentally related topics such as climate change mitigation and adaptation, alternative energy, eco-efficiency, etc. I couldn't agree more that there is a particular awareness in youth about the risks, not the risks, the reality of global warming, and that, and also somebody said this morning, most of the jobs are created at the small company, no, at the small. I think it's critical when we are presenting. We talk more about clean energy, eco-efficiency, about preservation of your environment, more that about, because climate change has this connotation a little esoteric that I think the way to sell it is really for companies, for small communities to understand that by preserving this, they also preserve they're better off. They are more efficient, they create new jobs, but clearly green economy, green jobs are crucial. We have a similar a complementary program which is called EcoMicro, which really is the first program in the region to very massively promote green microfinance and engage really micro-entrepreneurs with MFIs to really either open up very small micro businesses that are related to somehow climate change and environment. I just wanted to piggyback on your comments on results. Really, this is we have I think considerably improved how we measure our impact, our results throughout this after 18 years. Now half of our staff is in 26 offices. They work, when we always design a project with a local executing agency. We have a system of disbursement by results where we identify milestones and of course there's and also exogenous variables that might influence the external risks to the project, if you will, a clear delimitation or distinction between outputs and outcomes, a baseline so that we can really have very important and solid indicators. Where I think we personally have a lot of room for improvement is in one key question that I also refer to is what happens after those 3 years. I mean, typically sustainability is the name of the game. We are starting to produce a baseline, together with the baseline at the start of the program, to have a baseline at the end of our intervention so that we can track 2 to 3 years down the road whether really this trickled down, whether the people are still employed. I believe in the case of youth, it's difficult. I think we are not using very effectively, frankly, the social networks and all these new tools that really can get them engaged. I think also how to really give them some incentives to feel part of a community so that they can give back to that community, but also ways to trace where they are and how they are evolving. No, I think we're still there, not completely up to speed.
Up to the right level.
Yeah.
Just
Fernando, thank you. Dipali, I'm going to save you and Beth for the next 4 questions. So we'll take 4 more questions, and then I think we're due for a break. All right. So those of you, 2 of you have microphones.
No, okay.
So I see 2 over here. Anybody from this side? Yes. Here's a lady here. So if you'd be, yes, good. If you split, please.
Hi, my name's Jessica and I work for an NGO called Restless Development. Restless as in young people are, and so are we as Restless Development. We're a youth-led development agency, so we're a very young team globally. I work in the Uganda office and the average age of my team is 26. All our programs are designed, led, monitored, evaluated and hotly debated and discussed by young people. And I'm absolutely delighted to hear the interest in youth voice. I think that's really exciting. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time, but to hear the interest in meaningfully engaging young people from the private sector, from government, from policymakers is great. I think also, Dipali, I was pleased to hear you use the word accountability, because for me the question is always youth voice in what? Youth participation in what? And I think there is a danger that as we move into this, we embrace this tipping point together in collaboration, that we open up the space for young people to participate, but there isn't a clarity of purpose for that participation. And I think we have to ask, are we talking about consultation? Are we talking about dialogue? Are we talking about supporting young people to hold us to account? And I include ourselves in that, but I also include the private sector. And I think that's a huge agenda, and it's not at no cost. It's costly in terms of time. It's costly in terms of attitudinal change as well that's required. And it's a sort of a delight and excitement from me, but also that we should approach that cautiously, because otherwise we will see more unrest and we'll see a disillusioned and even further disenfranchised youth population.
All right, thank you. Very good comment, Jessica. Yes, who has the microphone? Yes.
Hi, Guillermo Asiain from Mexico. Buenas tardes. We made a big mistake when we were checking a profile of one of our participants. He has spent 2 years without any job, so we say, okay, he's good. He went to one of the vulnerable places where we have a center. Okay, we say, well, we check. And basically he was 23 years old, so we say, doesn't work, doesn't study, and he's in one of the colonias, dangerous colonias in Juarez. So we accepted into the program, and we said we have one vulnerable youth. But our surprise was that he already graduated from school. He had spent 2 years without any opportunity to work, so he entered into the program. He was inside already. That was a mistake. And we found out that after he graduated from the program, not only he obtained a job, but he was able to become a manager of the place, and now they're employing 15 more vulnerable youth. So, I mean, agencies love the term vulnerable youth. Organizations, we love vulnerable youth. We love testimonials of vulnerable youth stories. What will be your call to action on these youth that they're not that vulnerable?
Thank you. All right, vulnerable. Let's see. Who? Yes, there's a lady right here. And wasn't there another or fourth one? And yes, good. Hey.
Linda Nemec with Accenture. We're a large employer around the world, about 250,000 people. Do a lot of management and technology consulting, but we also run a lot of the outsourcing centers. And my point is that to work in a lot of jobs these days, you need not just the technical skills and the life skills, but you need something that comes from your schooling, which is critical thinking and problem solving. And I think if we're talking about going to scale, incorporating gaming, e-learning, you have to get back to the curriculum. And you have to get back to the ministries of education and the folks who are designing the curriculums and who are teaching the teachers. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we have, because we've talked to some of these folks and either they don't know how to get started or they don't want to change.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Or both.
Yes, and then our final question, please. And we'll make this short, and then Beth and Dipali, you are going to be the answer people, and very short.
Thank you. Can I speak in French, because I don't speak English goodly?
You both
and
speak French? No.
Moi, je parle.
I'll translate. All right.
Thank you.
Mais très court.
Je suis Madame Mayouche Saleha, la directrice de l'action sociale de la wilaya de Annaba en Algérie. Donc, je m'occupe de toute la prise en charge et la protection de toutes les couches défavorisées et faibles, les personnes âgées, les mères célibataires, les jeunes en difficulté, comment dirais-je, c'est-à-dire tous les orphelins.
Yeah. So she works with all the...
Yeah.
Mrs.
So,
Mayouche is from the...
I'm sorry. Why don't we just move right to the comment, and then you can do everything all at once.
Oh.
Oui. Si. Alors,
That's too much to remember.
Donc, en plus de toutes ces tâches-là, je m'occupe aussi de l'exécution des programmes d'insertion des jeunes en difficulté et des jeunes chômeurs. Donc, je voudrais parler brièvement de notre expérience en Algérie. Donc, je m'occupe... en Algérie aussi, les jeunes constituent un grand problème, comme dans tous les pays. Cependant, je considère que la question de l'emploi est primordiale. Elle est même la cause de tous les vices. Oui.
We need a question. We need something short.
C'est une question
très court.
Très court.
Oui.
Donc,
est-ce qu'il y a une question?
Yes. Non, je voudrais juste dire que, en ce qui concerne l'Algérie, il y a eu beaucoup de dispositifs qui ont été mis en place d'emploi. Cependant, ces dispositifs sont restés sans impact. Ils n'ont pas généré beaucoup de postes d'emploi durables. Et je voudrais également parler d'une catégorie la plus difficile. C'est la catégorie qui est sans niveau et qui sont chômeurs. Pour cette catégorie, on a malheureusement, il n'y a pas eu de dispositifs qui ont été mis en place. Nous sommes actuellement en phase de réflexion pour les intégrer définitivement. Ceci se fait dans le cadre d'une plateforme qui est mise en place avec la Fondation internationale de la jeunesse. C'est pour ça que je dis que je suis très contente que cette fondation soit représentée en Algérie. Notre problème, ce n'est pas un problème d'emploi, mais c'est un problème de projet, de comportemental. Donc, nous sommes en train de travailler ensemble pour veiller à ce que ces jeunes-là aient une appartenance au pays, qu'ils puissent s'intégrer définitivement dans la société, surtout... Pardon.
Madame, pardon. Un moment.
Oui.
So, could you just capsulize this?
Yes, I will
in
try.
English into a question,
right.
And then perhaps we could ask that we could continue this after the session.
Right.
Thank
so
you.
Mrs. Mayouch is director of the social action in a region northeast of Algeria, and through that they are responsible for a number of work opportunities, engaging young people through in different type of schemes that have been developed over the last 5-10 years in Algeria. Her comments was that most of those initiatives were not very effective, mostly because they were the employment that were given to young people were not long-term employment, they were very short-term. Young people could not stick to the jobs, and the major problem that she's facing is that the young people do not associate themselves with the country. They don't have a project of life. They are disillusioned by so many things. And she sees the involvement of IYF in Algeria as very, as bringing some hope to what they are doing, because that's changing the mindset of young people, and not just giving them some skills, some hard skills, but really helping them find a place in society, which is one of the most critical points that they perceive in Algeria.
Excellent, thank you. And we will continue this discussion later, but let me turn to Beth and Dipali. You have 2 comments and 2 questions. So we have this one on Algeria, if you have a reflection. We also have vulnerability and
accountability.
Accountability, yeah.
I'll probably take the accountability one and the Algeria one. I think on accountability, Jessica, you bang on right. You don't want it to become tokenistic. We really want to, it's not the flavor of the month, the flavor of the year. You don't want everybody to jump onto the bandwagon and just say, yes, we're listening to young people. It comes with a lot of responsibility. And I truly mean it, So how we, at the end of the day, holding ourselves accountable to what we've heard at the time of the program design, that's generally where most of us do very well. We listen to them, okay, what are your hopes and aspirations? That's the end of the story. We go around designing the program, we implement it ourselves, monitoring and evaluation, they're not involved. So in terms of the program cycle, the easiest part is just consulting in the beginning. How do we take them along through every single process? And it's hard. It's not easy because obviously they're going to ask difficult questions. We need to be prepared for that. And yes, we need to be truly accountable to them. So we'd love to learn from your experience and happy to have a conversation after this. Going back to your experience, I think, again, the need for a holistic approach to really look at what are the root causes that are preventing these young people to really get to decent jobs or to really become transformational leaders. I think it's so important for us to take the time to really address the root cause of the problem, because many a time I think we just feel that we're addressing symptoms. We just know, this is going to happen and this is going to address this current situation. It doesn't happen that way. So,
good. Thank you, Dipali. Beth.
I'll address the issue of the non-vulnerable youth. I think was the question, is what are we doing for non-vulnerable youth? Yeah. In Jordan, we have programs that target various different demographics within the youth population. So we are working with university graduates to kind of reskill or learn soft skills to get that job, or even how to write a resume, because many of the universities were not didn't have the program set up to do that. That's a changing thing now. We're working more closely with universities so that what they're recruiting for is more relevant to the job market, and that they're actually addressing hands-on skills that make them more relevant to the job market. So we're working with that group, and that group is important to work with largely because their actual unemployment rates are higher than those who don't have college degrees. Other things with non-vulnerable youth is there are regional programs that we bring youth together for learning about peacemaking, learning about how to have an effective dialogue on political issues, on human rights issues. So there are a lot of, and those again are working with universities within the country. So there's a big, very large program, I guess, and we probably spend more on that cohort than we do maybe the vulnerable youth in Jordan, which we have to look at and balance because we want to make sure we're hitting, the maximum extent we can. But simply because that group was the one that had the higher unemployment numbers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Beth. Then Peter, perhaps you have some announcements for us going to lunch, and would all of you join me in thanking this amazingly excellent panel?